So, of course, the NBA season just begun, and I know you're probably thinking, oh, he's got a lot to say about each individual team. No, I do not, because it just started. We cannot gauge these teams based on 5 games when they're about to go about this long 82-game season. No, I'm not doing it, because guess what? If I say shit about certain teams, everything's going to be disproven, because nothing looks the same, especially in basketball, because some players start off hot, some players start off ice cold. Like, it's just how it works, and most of the time, you know, the guys that we're not used to being as good or bad as they are at the start of the season, they turn it around, because it's never sustainable. But anyway, you see the title. We're backing up a little bit. You remember when what's his name, Noah Lyles, the track star, said the whole thing about the world champions, and then everyone was on the case of all NBA players, American NBA players at that, for saying that he was wrong about his take. And then of course Team USA caught the heat for it. World champions or what? World champions or what? World champions or what? Yeah, let's talk about it. Okay, so the actual debate is a touchy subject, right? Like the whole thing about whether or not you can crown the NBA champion world champions, okay? But before we even get into that, let me get this out of the way, because the thing that pissed me off about this whole thing was that for whatever reason, the argument got completely misconstrued as FIBA went on. Why was Team USA being asked world champions of what? Team USA is not an NBA team. Like, the whole thing was that the NBA champion is not the world champion, right? The NBA champion this past year, the top 2 players were international born players. There was a Serbian guy and a Canadian guy. They are not on Team USA. Moreover, the champions of FIBA were won by NBA players. Mo Wagner, Franz Wagner, shout out my boys, yes sir, and Dennis Schroeder and company. So what does FIBA play have to do with the NBA championship? Because that's not an NBA team. The best players in the NBA are international. The argument wasn't that the best basketball players in the world are from America, because that's not the case. And quite frankly, I don't think anybody thinks that anymore. And of course, you know, the reason this happened is kind of obvious, but I just think it's wrong, right? Like, for one, the NBA is, of course, hosted out of the United States. It is a United States created league, okay? Then you had American born players mainly being the ones to defend the whole world champions thing. But I think the main reason that this became a narrative and that Team USA took the heat for this whole world champions thing was because a lot of people are just sick of the arrogance of US people, which is very fair. I mean, let's be honest, as somebody who was born and raised here and has only been out of the country like twice, 3 times maybe, I lost count, that we some arrogant ass motherfuckers. But again, like, the FIBA play has no argument on it, because, like, in order to say, like, oh, well, the NBA teams aren't world champions, like, if you wanted to prove that given the play of Team USA, you got to take the NBA players off the other teams. You know what I'm saying? And that's not going to happen. So that's not a good argument for that. And again, right now, at this point in time, I'm not saying that I disagree with the whole world champions thing. It's a touchy subject, and I'm going to get into it in a second. But all I'm saying is that made no sense. And I think people were just pissed off at the arrogance of America, which is fair, but also you're fighting arrogance with ignorance. Now we're getting into, well, you're one and the same. Now let's talk about the actual argument that NBA champions are not world champions, okay? I'm so torn between the, like, it's such a touchy subject. Like I said, I think that the title of world champions can be done without, okay? But here is the thing that people are just failing to understand. There's no restriction on who can play in the NBA. Like, calling the NBA champions world champions isn't like a ode to America. It's an ode to the best basketball players in the world, which come from all over the world. It's misconstrued that because the league is played in America, that this is just like strictly an American boast. Like, it's not at all. I mean, how many of the top players in the league right now are foreign born, and how many scouts go internationally nowadays? All of them. And ironically, I'm going to make a video probably right after this about the state of American basketball and why it sucks. But again, especially in this day and age, like, if there was some kind of restriction on, like, oh, you're from this country, so you don't get as much of an opportunity to play in America. Like, no, at this point in time, one, first of all, there's never been a restriction. Two, if you're good enough nowadays, like, they will find you. And so basically what I'm saying is, regardless of race, ethnicity, nationality, if you're not in the NBA, it's not because of who you are, where you're from. It's because you are simply not good enough. And so, like, of course, the argument is, well, there's, other pro teams with non-NBA players, and, it's not like these NBA teams are beating these other pro teams around the league, so you can't call them world champions. Well, I mean, sure, but I would love to see that. I really would love to see that. Like, honestly, let's do it. But the thing is that, like, all the international players wouldn't want to do it because it would expose their countries. And it's not really exposure because, again, if you aren't in the NBA, you're not good enough. The NBA is, yes, hosted in America, but it's not an American league. It's open to all. So if you're arguing that Americans don't have the best basketball players, again, not only is that a valid argument, you are right at this point in time, but that's not the argument. That is, for whatever reason, just what it was made out to be after that was said, and NBA players were like, nah, that's not true, Noah Lyles. So do I actually think that the NBA champions are world champions or should be deemed world champions? Well, one thing that made me question that is that I saw someone say, well, like, the best leagues in soccer don't deem themselves the world champions, and that's what makes me question that. But it is a little bit different because the talent in soccer is spread about, the variety of leagues. I don't watch a lot of soccer, so I don't want to talk about the leagues individually so before soccer fans get mad at me. But what I do know is that there are a lot of good leagues, and then of course Champions League is played. But of course, regardless, none of those teams are crowned world champions at the end of it. And like I said, while the NBA and basketball works very differently, and it's like, again, if you're not in the NBA, it's because you're not good enough. Like, no overseas player had an opportunity to play in the NBA and just said, nah, I'm good, I'm gonna stay over here. There have been scenarios of, like, players playing their way out of the league, or like maybe being fringe roster guys, and they're like, well, I don't want to just ride the bench. I've done my due diligence in the league. I'm gonna go overseas and drop 40 a game. That's a little bit different, but regardless, it does work differently than, like, soccer. However, what I will conclude with this argument is that, yes, I think the NBA can do without the world champion title because of the fact that there are other leagues in the world that are considered professional leagues. Plenty of them. However, okay, a fact that will hold true is that the best players in the world play in the NBA. The National Basketball Association has the best players in the world, and there's no arguing that, again, because there's no restriction. All the best players internationally and in every country play in the NBA, regardless of race, ethnicity, nationality, where you're from. I already said this. And before you argue, like, yeah, well, Facu Campazzo is very capable of being on an NBA team, but he plays over in Spain. Okay, well, if Facu Campazzo can take on a team of Luka, Giannis, Jokic, Embiid, and fucking LeBron with Steph coming off the bench, then sure. Then like, let me see that first, and then you can argue that the best players in the world don't play in the NBA. And you have to understand from a marketing standpoint why the NBA does it and why the NFL does it, right? They want to make their players feel as special as possible. They want to make the league hold as much value as possible. And the bottom line is, like, what is any other league gonna do about it? Like, if the Czechoslovakian National League was like, yo, bro, I don't like the fact that you're crowning yourselves world champions, it'd be like, all right, bro, come play the Nuggets. Or better yet, here, let's go compile Luka, Giannis, and etc. And then come play that team. You win, your league can be the world champions. I think that's kind of the thought process of the NBA, and you kind of have to understand why it happens. But again, as far as arguing, like, which country has the best basketball players and what, that's what FIBA and the Olympics are for, okay? And I think that, honestly, I love it because I think we're on a trajectory of, like, FIBA starting to hold more value to basketball. And I love it. Like, obviously, the Olympics are great, but, like, we're 10 years away from super, super competitive FIBA tournaments and Olympics being completely up for grabs. Really, anybody's gold medal for the taking. Like, even when, like, USA people were trying to argue that, oh, you think this FIBA team's good? Well, wait till we go get KD, LeBron, Steph, and all these guys. Like, that's a phenomenal team. But first of all those guys are 35 plus, right? And it's like, low key, if Giannis has some hoopers around him in Greece or Jokic, like, he could beat that team. And then, of course, you got, like, countries like Canada who would just have great rosters in general. But regardless, I think the NBA being so international nowadays is great for basketball. It is, and we should appreciate it. And I'm very much looking forward to the Olympics. It's coming up this year, right? Or next year, rather. 2024 is what I mean. I'm pretty sure it's coming up in 2024, but correct me if I'm wrong. And also, please let me know what you think. This is a very, very touchy topic. Again, my answer on the whole world champions thing is hardly even solidified. It wasn't. So what do you guys think? Let me know. And again, if you want to know the problem with the state of American basketball, particularly the youth and whatnot, then stay tuned, because that's coming.